Today, me and Tuck are going to share with you 10 mistakes you cannot afford to make when growing a garden. Let's go! The first mistake is starting too big. It's better to start a small garden, grab some harvests like we will right here, and feel like you can do more. Let's grab some of this lettuce right here. Wanting to do more because you start a relatively small garden and feeling like you want to expand, that's encouraging. But starting a big garden that you can't keep up with, that's discouraging, and it won't motivate you to continue growing more year after year. So you can learn a lot from a little garden that will prepare you for a bigger garden in the future. The next mistake is growing what I call advanced varieties. When you first start gardening, simple and easy is best. Growing some hybrid veggies, for instance the Super Sweet 100 tomato, is easy and reliable to grow, as opposed to growing an heirloom variety that's kind of tough to grow, like the Queen of the Night tomato. Also, look into growing some varieties of crops that produce quickly. For instance, this early Jersey Wakefield cabbage only takes about 60 days from seed to harvest, while this dead-on Savoy cabbage takes about 105 days from seed to harvest. Shorter time to production means less time for problems to occur. Another mistake that almost all new gardeners make is starting seeds too early. When your plants have to sit and wait in a pot for the weather to warm up, they can get stressed and root bound. This brassica right here is the same age as this cabbage you see right here. Look how much healthier this one looks. I just didn't have space to put this one in the garden, but when you start plants too early, it can just cause a lot of unneeded stress. If you did start your plants too early, you don't want to make the additional mistake of planting out too early. A couple of nice days can really trick you. Here, we had a few days where it was like in the 80s during the day and then the 60s at night. So I kind of wanted to press my luck a little bit and get some tomatoes in early. As a result, this tomato got a little too stressed because it dropped into the 40s a few nights after that. That's okay though, because I have about 4 or 5 backups for every single variety that I have. So if you do want to press your luck and start some stuff early, make sure you have backups or some plan or way to cover your plants if a cold snap comes. A mistake I often see beginner gardeners make is planting too densely. It can be kind of confusing trying to plant out a whole bed with proper spacing. That is why I love using this square foot method. That's why I have these squares here lined up with this string. The square foot method allows me to grow the most amount of food in the smallest amount of space while not overcrowding things and still getting good production. If you're going to push the limits and plant stuff close like I do, you don't want to make the mistake of not providing your plants with the proper nutrition with some good fertilizer. So I like to use something as simple as an all-purpose fertilizer like you see here, or even a fish fertilizer if you want to use a liquid fertilizer like you see right here. Plants that are healthy and vigorous can fight off pests and disease better. Look at some of these plants. Look at the color, look at the health. So providing your plants with the right amount of nutrition, especially when they're densely planted, is super important. Look at this lettuce down here. Healthy plants, you love to see it. When I first started gardening, I made the common mistake of not having a pest management plan. When you first get going, you're worried about what to plant, when to plant, how to plant. The last thing you want to think of is pests, but the reality is they will come in. So the best way to deal with them is actually to prevent them in the first place. My favorite way to prevent pests is with something as simple as just an insect netting. So protection of your plants is key. Something like this just makes a massive difference. Now the cabbage white butterflies can't come in and no cabbage worms on my young plants. If you have plants that are going to flower, like cucumbers or something, just make sure you take the insect netting off when they start to flower so they can get pollinated. Another advanced form of protection that I like to use is known as surround kaolin clay. I have to spray this white clay on my apples and a lot of my fruits because the plum curculio, a bug comes in and attacks them. So this makes it so I don't have to kind of manage them. I can prevent the issues by protecting my plants. Come over here. If you didn't do a good job protecting your plants, there are always some ways to deal with the pests after they've arrived. For instance, if you want to deal with something like worms, say cabbage worms or even tomato hornworms, BT and spinosad are great options for that. If some of your issues are like soft-bodied insects, like whiteflies or aphids, then something like the Safer soap is a great choice, and so is the neem oil. So there are plenty of organic options to manage some pests when they come in. Just have a pest management plan and some ideas going into the scenario instead of having to like rush around to try to find a way to resolve an issue. If you can though, prevention is always the best. Another mistake new gardeners make is allowing plants like tomatoes and peppers to sprawl along the ground instead of growing them vertically up a trellis. Growing up a trellis not only makes plants easier to harvest and manage, it also allows the plants to get more airflow and more light penetration, which leads to less disease issues. Let me show you how I tie up my tomatoes. I just grab these clips, which are really nice, push it against the string, and then clip it around the tomato, just like that. Growing vertically is so convenient and has so many advantages. When the summer heat comes, keeping up on watering can be especially tough if you make the mistake of not mulching your plants. Something as simple as a diced leaf mulch or any natural mulch around the plants will help retain moisture and keep the soil cool, which will reduce the stress in your plants so they can focus on growth and production. The next mistake you don't want to make is failing to harvest your crop before it goes to seed. For example, this Zucchini Savoy right here. You can see it's starting to bolt. That means go to seed. When these kinds of plants go to seed, then they get bitter and they don't taste as good as when they're young. So you don't want to make the mistake of letting these go to seed before you grab them. A good thing to do with these kinds of plants or spinach or even lettuce, like you see down here, the spinach, is to do what's known as cut and come again. So as the spinach starts to get larger, pick up a bunch of this stuff and continue to harvest it. It will just continue to grow and you'll be able to make sure you get consistent harvests from it instead of just coming out one day, the whole thing's bolted and you've kind of lost your opportunity to get a good harvest. When I first started gardening, I made the mistake of not adding a bunch of different kinds of flowers to bring in pollinators and beneficial insects. I thought if I want to get a big harvest, then I should just plant cabbages and broccoli and lettuce and tomatoes, things that produce a harvest. I didn't realize how important flowers are for your overall system harvest. Like the flowers help support some of the other plants, so they end up increasing the harvest even though they might take up a little bit of space. So plants like a chamomile is really nice. It actually gives you a yield, but it does bring in a good amount of pollinators. Over here, I've got some other flowers planted too. It's still early in the year, so some of them are young, like my nasturtium here, but I plant all different kinds of flowers. Marigolds back here. So adding flowers brings in pollinators and beneficial insects, which will actually increase the yield when it comes down to it. The next mistake is probably one that almost all of us have been guilty of when we first started, and that's trying to do too much the first year. For instance, when you first get started, you don't have to buy your seed, start your plants from seed, transplant them out, save the seed, and just do everything the first year. If you want, when you're just getting started, you can start with a small raised bed, go to the store, get some hybrid plants that have already started, like the Juliet tomato is a good one, and plant that out. Just try to make it relatively easy on yourself and try to make it so you can get some good harvest when you're first starting. Like I mentioned before, that will build momentum and you'll learn a lot even from just doing that. Every year, you'll pick up more and more. And that's kind of the next mistake that I want to get into. It's you don't want to approach gardening with an annual mindset. You want to approach it with a perennial mindset. That's why you don't want to start too big. You could start small, you could expand, but knowledge compounds and your harvest will compound too. So you have to think of gardening in a perennial mindset. It's like a tree. I planted an apple tree and I don't get a harvest till about the 4th year. So if you think of gardening in like a 3, 4, 5 year mindset, then you're gonna continue to expand, you're gonna grow more and more food, it's going to be encouraging, you're gonna really, really enjoy it, and your harvests are just gonna be absolutely massive. Check some of this stuff out down here. Radish City, some of the giant of Sicily radishes are getting pretty big. Look at that, perfect radish. Looks like the boss wants to show up once the radishes show up. Let me get a bite of it first to see how it tastes, and then I'll give him a piece. Hold on, boy, let me get a bite of it first, ready? Fresh radish from the garden, actually delicious. Look at that color. Not spicy or sharp or harsh at all. Incredibly sweet, super juicy. Tuck is gonna like this one for sure. He loves his root crops. Spam some hearts down low if you love seeing the young king in the videos. We'll let him snack on that. here is a mistake that I made that I hope you do not make. And I made the mistake of planting an invasive species in the ground. Look at this. Wow, look at all these plants you're thinking, this looks really healthy. This is mint. Mint is super invasive. It's taking over this whole section of my garden. So you wanna make sure you're not planting invasive species into the ground. The best thing to do would be to plant mint in a pot. You can get all the advantages of it. You can move the pot in different spots when the mint starts to flower, brings in all the pollinators, but just make sure you're not planting invasive species in the garden. It ends up being a headache trying to get rid of them. Check this out. Here's a flower. I was talking about how I added more flowers. Check out the beauty of the borage, one of my favorite all-time flowers. This one will self-seed relatively easily. I let it seed, and sometimes it pops up in different spots in the garden, so such a blessing to have in the garden. A fantastic flower. You can see the bees. They love it. They're working hard. It's bringing in the pollinators. It's bringing in the beneficial insects. You love to see it. You know what? After tasting that radish, I want to go back over and harvest the rest of those because they're so dang good. And I don't want to make the mistake of letting those start to bolt. Then they'll get bitter and they won't be as good as if I grab them now. So let's go get the rest of those radishes. Let's grab the rest of these giant of Sicily radishes. This one looking nice. I saw a monster one back here. Check this out. Oh, this must be a different variety. I must have mixed it in, but still looks pretty good. Check this one out here. Oh, that's a big one. That looks like someone's, you know, maybe a backside. Tuck will probably love that one. Tuck, you like the one that looks like a butt boy? No, this guy's got some dirt on his head. You know it's a good day when you got dirt all over your head and you're snacking on fresh radishes. We'll give him just a bite or two. I don't want him eating too much radish. And let's get this one over here. A couple more to grab. Nice shape. Another one here. Another one here. Another one here. Nice little harvest of radishes. I like how that purple one's mixed in. It looks really cool. That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you got something out of it. Me and Tuck hope that you take some of the advice and avoid these mistakes, especially when you're new to gardening. I mean, I've made a lot of these mistakes even not being a new gardener, but a lot of these things, I wish I knew them when I first got started. So there are a lot of the things that if I could go back in time, I'd tell myself to, you know, avoid these things because it's just gonna make it harder on yourself. And I know how motivated and how excited you are when you first get into gardening. You want to take over your whole backyard like I have, just like pan around. I mean, this whole backyard has turned into a garden. It's kind of insane. And I did this after years and years. So I've been gardening for 12, 13 years now. Because of that, I know a lot of things that will happen before they do, so I can prepare for them. A lot of my preparation is done in the off season to set up going into the growing season right now. So just make sure you start slow. It'll make a massive difference and it'll just make gardening more fun for you overall. Me and Tuck wanted to thank one of our new channel members, Boston Rocks. Thanks for being a part of Team Grow. Thanks for having your hand in everything we're doing out here. The food forest is looking epic this year. You can see the brassicas are thriving. Only one or two of the tomatoes aren't doing that great, but come over here real quick. Look how healthy a lot of these tomatoes are in here. Look at the color on these. Look at that. And these over here. This is a small variety, but I just have so many tomatoes in and I have so many more tomatoes on deck ready to go in if we have an issue and another cold night. So overall, I mean, preparation, prevention, protection, there's so many P's that go along with gardening. You got to try to stay on top of all of them, but never quit, never give up, and make sure you're always continue to plant. Remember, there's no way to harvest if you don't plant. Tuck and James will be back at you again. Well, let's get one more shot of the little guy. Dirt face. He's having a good day today. He just went over to the doctors and they had to up his prednisone just a little bit. Overall, he's doing real good. It's just this time of the year when there's a lot of pollen and stuff out, it makes it a little harder for him to breathe. Overall, he's doing fantastic. He appreciates all the love. I appreciate it too. So Tuck and James will be back at you again real soon. We out.